And certainly close to coast. There'll be a bitter wind here, but elsewhere, out of the wind, temperatures struggling up above freezing. 3 or 4 degrees for most in the afternoon in the sunny spells, but quickly temperatures dropping back below freezing through tomorrow evening. So again, a fairly extensive frost. Still some showers for North Wales, Northern Ireland and particularly northeastern Scotland. So again, ice is likely to be a hazard on Friday morning. Fog is also likely, some dense patches of freezing fog across parts of northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland that could last for most of Friday. But most of us on Friday just dry, fine and sunny. A bright, crisp winter's day with temperatures stumbling up a degree or so, still below average. But actually, with little breeze and the sunshine, shouldn't feel too bad, 5 to 6 Celsius. So the cold weather is persisting. Signs of a change slowly, and I do mean slowly, milder air creeping in from the west, although the east will stay cold right through the weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, well, there may be strikes looming, but growth figures a few days ago better than expected. Inflation down today. We'll debate, is the worst of the economic crisis behind us? We'll have a look at Liz Truss. She's trying overnight to launch her legacy. Does it mean much? Will it actually work? Donald Trump is coming back onto Twitter. Gosh, that should make a bit of a noise. And joining me on Talking Pints, Robert Malone. Now, he was the inventor of the mRNA vaccine turned skeptic. Hold on to your hats for what he has to say about that vaccine. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The Prime Minister says he wants to ensure all serving police officers in the force are fit to serve. All police forces in Britain will now have to double-check their officers against the National Police Database to identify anybody who shouldn't be in the service. Serving Officer David Carrick was sacked from the Metropolitan Police yesterday after admitting to 49 criminal charges, including 24 counts of rape against 12 women over an 18-year period. Rishi Sunak called the abuse of power seen in the Met this week despicable and said it needed to be addressed immediately.
I think the vetting processes have been significantly strengthened over the past couple of years, and this particular individual, I'm confident, would not have passed those vetting processes today. But what we want to do is make sure that there aren't serving police officers anywhere at any stage in their career, or indeed staff in police forces who shouldn't be there.
Now, as nurses in England stage a two-day strike, the Labour leader is urging the Prime Minister to admit the NHS is in crisis. Members of the Royal College of Nursing from 55 NHS trusts are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay and patient safety. Thousands of operations and appointments are expected to be cancelled. And 10,000 ambulance workers will strike in the coming weeks as part of their ongoing dispute over pay and staffing levels. Paramedics, emergency care and call handlers in the GMB union will walk out on the 6th of February and the 20th of March, following what it says is no action from the government. And the National Education Union says teachers are also planning to walk out for 7 days across February and March after no real progress on pay had been made for them. The rate at which prices are rising has slowed for the second month in a row, but the cost of some food has hit a 45-year high. The Office for National Statistics says the rate of inflation fell to 10.5% in December. That's down from 10.7% the month before. It says falling fuel prices were largely behind the slowdown, with the average petrol cost down by 8.3 pence a litre since last month. Now, a missing couple and their newborn baby have enough cash to allow them to stay off-grid, according to police who've begun a missing persons investigation. Mark Gordon, Constance Martin and their child have been missing for 11 days. They were last seen getting into a taxi to London from Essex. Mr. Gordon is a sex offender, while Miss Martin comes from a wealthy aristocratic family. The police worry that Miss Martin and the baby have not had medical attention since the birth. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, of course, there's plenty of bad news out there. It's, as the Major once famously said on Faulty Towers, strikes. We bother. And on the 1st of February, it's going to be the nurses, it's going to be the teachers, it's going to be the railway drivers, and an endless list of those going on strike. There's also been this week a significant business failure, which I'll talk about over the course of the next few minutes. But I guess we can't ignore the fact that the growth figures that came out a few days ago were slightly, albeit slightly, but they were better than expected. Inflation is beginning to fall. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, tells us it will halve over the course of this year. The price of natural gas is now lower than it was this time last year before the invasion of Ukraine. Is the worst of the economic crisis behind us? I'm not convinced, actually, that it is. I think inflation tends to be stickier than people realise, to hang around for longer than most so-called experts think. But, you know, a lot of people out there, there's a very big, bullish consensus among many economic commentators that by the end of this year, things are going to be, well, not rosy, but better than they are now. What do you think? Farage at gbnews.uk is the worst of the crisis behind us. Now, before I introduce our guest, our business and economics head, Liam Halligan, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has addressed the nation about the inflation crisis. Just have a look, have a listen to this.
Getting more expensive. A year ago it would have been around £2.50, but now it's gone up to nearly £3 a cup. There are lots of reasons why inflation has risen. One of them is COVID. Global supply chains struggled to cope, and that pushed prices up. Another is Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which pushed global gas prices to their highest ever level. Energy prices will remain high for some time. And all that means that the price of a cup of coffee has gone up.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Why do they try to pretend they're normal human beings? They're not. They're a bunch of Oxbridge weirdos, in my opinion. And there he was. The entirety of the inflation problem. Nothing to do with me, Gov. Nothing to do with us whatsoever. It's all because of COVID and Ukraine. Well, joining me is somebody who is a career economist who might just have something to say about that. Nothing to do with the government whatsoever. It's all because of COVID and Ukraine.
I agree with you, Nigel. The growth figure out last week was a lot better than expected, though the UK economy grew by a mere 0.1%.
Yeah,
blink and you'll miss it in November, but it was better than expected. This inflation number which came out this morning, it was higher than lots of people expected, in my view. Inflation did come down from 10.7% in November to 10.5% in December, still more than 5 times the Bank of England's 2% target.
And still a 40-year high, effectively.
Still, it was actually the 41-year high was October when it was at 11.1%. But these are still eye-watering numbers.
Yeah.
And within that 10.5% inflation number, food inflation up 16.9%. Blimey, that's why when you go into Tesco's and Sainsbury's, other supermarkets are available for a few bits, you end up spending 50 quid.
So basically, fuel has come down.
Fuel has come down a bit, but it's still, the rate of increase has come down.
Yeah.
Fuel inflation is 11.4% in December, still very, very high, but less sky high than it was. And food inflation is very, very high. Things like transport, buses, trains, inflation is less. Recreation, leisure industries, inflation's a bit less, but still very, very high. And when inflation is still at 10.5%, it's very difficult for the government to go to the public sector unions and say, you don't need an inflation-busting pay rise because the cost of living squeeze is coming down.
But here's my point. Yes, of course, COVID, supply chain disruption has had an effect on inflation. Yes, of course, the energy price shock that we saw after the 24th of February last year has had an effect. But here we have a Conservative Chancellor not admitting that borrowing and spending and creating money on a scale never seen before in the history of this country over the course of the last 14, 15 years, in fact, has been a direct contributory factor to inflation. He won't even admit it, Liam.
Let's be completely clear. This is a cost of living crisis, but it's also a cost of lockdown crisis. Those supply chain issues were there because a wall of post-lockdown pent-up demand hit a world economy that could barely respond because of all the supply chain discombobulations, if you like. That caused price rises. That's why, Nigel, British inflation was already at a 30-year high in January 2022 before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in the final week of February, as you say. What I'd also say is from the Chancellor's coffee little skit there, he's being dubbed Mr. Coffee Bean, as if any normal punters get their coffee from a machine like that. Crikey, they put a bit of Nescafe in a cup and stir it, don't they? Maybe with a bit of mellow birds. So you're right. I thought it was contrived and looked a bit crazy. But what he didn't mention when he was describing why there is inflation is the fact that during the COVID lockdown, the Bank of England created more money under its quantitative schemes during 18 months of lockdown than it had during the 10 years after the 2008-9 financial crisis. We created the Bank of England around 400 billion, that's B for billion, 400,000 million pounds.
It's just off the charts.
And that money, the government
charts.
will deny it, the Bank of England will deny it, that money was used to fund furlough, to fund business support schemes, making lockdown happen. And that money, unlike the post-financial crisis QE, which stayed largely within the financial system, ramping up share prices and upmarket house prices, that post-COVID QE money went directly into the bank accounts of firms and households. That's why I think it is a significant part of this inflation story. But almost nobody in the mainstream media wants to talk about it because QE has friends in high places, in the City of London and also in Whitehall, because it means ministers can borrow more cheaply than they otherwise would.
Now, we've got obviously strikes going on right across the public sector, 1 or 2 in the private sector as well. I quite understand why no worker wants a pay increase less than inflation, but there are things called the facts of life. What are the private sector, what are those pay increases running at?
OK, so overall pay rises during the last 3 months of 2022, the average pay was 6.5% higher than the last 3 months of 2021. That headline wage increase was the highest since 2001, and yet it was completely blown away by inflation. Because of high inflation, real wages during that period, the last few months of last year compared to the year before, were 3.4% down, and that's the biggest fall in real wages post-inflation since 2009. So you have headline wage rises and headline wage falls at the same time, because that's what inflation does. Now, breaking down that 6.5% pay rise that we had, private sector workers on average got a 7.1% pay rise, and public sector workers got a 3.3% pay rise. Now, a lot of public sector unions will say, you see, it's really unfair because the public sector gets less. But still, Nigel, and I found these figures on the ONS website, and they're pretty hard to find, the average public sector wage is still higher than the average private sector wage.
And the pensions are far better.
And the sick leave, and the bigger holiday entitlement, and the flexibility, and the job security, and the public sector workers during lockdown.
In fact, sarcastically,
did not take a pay cut. They weren't they were furloughed on 100% wages.
At home.
The rest of us were furloughed, if we were lucky, not self-employed people like me and you,
if
80%.
If the civil service go on strike as well on the 1st of February, who would notice? Final thought. Boris Johnson told us, we will build a gigafactory in Northumberland, creating thousands of jobs in our industrial heartland and housing electric vehicle production as part of our green industrial revolution. How's it looking?
This is a very, very interesting story. And actually, after this show, I'm getting on a train to go up to the northeast of England to film on this story, talk to many, many people in the region all day tomorrow. And I'll be talking about it on GB News Live and creating a film. British Volt is a start-up company that was meant to be building the biggest car battery factory in Britain, not a conventional car battery that runs the windscreen wipers and the starter motor, the big batteries for electric vehicles. They had a £100 million government credit line contingent on raising private sector money. The private sector money just isn't there. So the company has folded, and that raises questions about car making in the northeast of England, our biggest car making cluster, bigger now than the Midlands, because unless you've got the batteries being made near the cars, if we move to electric vehicles, you can't make the cars because the batteries are so expensive and to transport because they're so heavy.
Liam, I want you to report back to us on what you find. Piece of advice for all of you at home. If Boris Johnson gives you a big tip as to what's going to happen in a commercial company, please do not follow it. It will end in tears. Now, Liz Truss, 45 days and gone. But a think tank has been launched in her honour. Could this be yet another division within the Conservative Party? We'll discuss that in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instinct was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So, some of your thoughts at home. Do you think the worst of the economic crisis is behind us? The Prime Minister is encouraging you to think so. I'm a little bit sceptical. Let's see what you think. David says, food inflation is still running at 16.9%. Don't hang up the bunting just yet. Well, very good words of caution there, I think, David. Andy says, inflation doesn't take into account food or others above 10%, and also doesn't take into account the extra costs of ripping up Brexit laws, which will cause businesses to drive up prices. Well, the object's the opposite, actually. Or if Russia or China decide to escalate things. Andy, the idea of getting rid of EU regulation is actually to make things cheaper and easier. However, one of the reasons that I'm less optimistic than this great consensus that exists amongst the investment experts in London and New York is history's told me that once you have inflation, it's stickier. It stays around for longer than anyone thinks. The second is, got to be honest with you, I do not think we have seen the worst in Ukraine by far, and the impact that may have on food inflation in particular, and perhaps energy too, I don't think people have really calculated in the markets. That's my view. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit pessimistic, but that is my fear. And finally, Phil says, I think the worst is behind us, but inflation and growth must be top of the government agenda, and to get down the cost of immigration by blocking them coming in. Well, OK, growth. That was what Phil talked about. And we're about to talk about growth. We really, really are. Now, Liz Truss. I mean, who would have believed that Liz Truss could become Prime Minister? But she did. And a couple of bright sparks, Harry Cole from The Sun and James Heal, who joins me now from The Spectator. And I heard quite early on they were doing a Truss biography. And the title they chose, absolutely brilliant. Out of the blue. I thought really good because it just works at every level. And I thought, James, welcome, by the way, to the programme. I thought, well, this is going to be an absolute winner. You know, you're on this, nobody else is. 45 days and she was gone. How's the book doing?
It's doing all right, thank you.
Is it really?
Yeah, no. And timely as well, because, after a bit of time away from the spotlight, last night there was a meeting of this new group, which Liz is involved with.
Well, that's right. I was thinking, well, 45 days she's gone. She turned up at the Cenotaph. She's been pretty quiet. She's, personally been through a pretty humiliating. And what do you think of her politics? It's been very tough for her. So just tell us what happened last night.
Sure. So I think you're right, as you say, that, after 10 years in government, had not had a holiday when she wasn't a minister for 10 years. There was a sort of period out in the sun. Yeah. And then yesterday, Parliament's now back, and there was a launch, a quite low-key launch of the Conservative Growth Group with some of her key supporters.
The Growth Group.
Exactly. Because I think there's a bit of concern, which is that after Rishi Sunak took over, there's been less of an emphasis on economic growth and more about balancing the books. So this is a group of around 40 or so MPs who want to kind of keep that flame going and also try and get some policies which are going to stimulate the economy ahead of the next election.
What you don't mean they believe in low taxes at a small state?
Depends who you ask, I'd say, Nigel. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see how the group operates coming up to the budget in March.
Who are the significant players in the group?
In the group, Ranil Jayawardena and Simon Clarke, who are both cabinet ministers under Truss. And I think Liz herself hasn't got a formal position within the group, but it's part of a sort of wider series of initiatives. Simon Clarke is also launching the Next Gen Tories, which is about how we can win over the under 40, how the party can win over under 40s, things on childcare, planning, deregulation, etc., like that. So it's part of a sort of wider moving picture. And of course, you then got Boris Johnson as well. And last week he was there.
I'm going to come to him in a second, but just a sort of final thought on Truss, if I may, on our own. So is a think tank that emphasises growth, is this in a sense her legacy?
I wouldn't say it's a think tank, it's more a pressure group.
Okay.
And I think that this is because you've got a majority of 70 or so in Parliament, but of course, as you've seen, Rishi Sunak is willing to kind of back down on certain things, and you saw that in the space of 48 hours, I think, at the end of last year, when they had the U-turn on planning targets and then the U-turn on onshore wind, which due to an amendment which both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss signed. And I think that shows that if you get a group together, you can sort of, it's a party of interests, and certain different factions are moving in certain ways. And I think the hope is if you can get a kind of growth, a pro-growth faction, if you will, that's going to kind of push Rishi Sunak and the government to doing more pro-growth policies.
Now, obviously, the point of Rishi Sunak was to bring stability. I mean, as I see it, stability and policy failure. But never mind, things are calmer than they were. And yet, you've got the Boris faction setting up their new Conservative Democratic organisation, Lord Cruddas with a big chequebook behind it, looking for quite sort of almost Tony Bennite type changes within the Conservative. And Boris, for many, not as many as it was, but for many, is, you know, sort of, it's rather like the Jacobites. It's drinking the toast. It's the king across the water. And they believe that Boris can come back and lead them to great success. But it is interesting that there is a Trussite group as well, who believe the party has become, you know, too high tax, too big state. And then you've got the Rishyites. So the point of Rishi was to unite the party. Am I wrong to think there are now three separate camps of MPs?
I think that the word is overcorrection that's used. And so the danger, I think, that some of the sort of Trussites and sort of Johnsonites fear is that there was a kind of overcorrection after when Rishi Sunak came in and they said, OK, well, we've stabilised everything, the markets have calmed down, but we've gone too far into a kind of soft consensus and not actually challenging some vested interests on these things. I think that what is clear is that the Boris Johnson faction is more personal. I think people like Nadine Dorries just want their man back, as it were.
Regardless of anything.
Yeah, basically that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the Trussites is more about policy. And I think, in fairness, they're trying to say that, you know, stuff like the Conservative growth group isn't about, you know, being anti-Sunak, etc. But of course, it then comes down to votes in Parliament, etc., like that. So one can read these things. One can read these things.
Well, it may not be anti-Sunak, but it's probably anti-Jeremy Hunt.
Well, that might. Well, we'll see that, and coming up to the budget, you know, with those. I think already there's a report today in some of the press that there's going to be no tax cuts in that. Well, that's not obviously what some, you know, within the party would like, and that's not why they consider themselves to be Conservatives. I mean, I did an interview 2 weeks ago with Simon Clarke, and he said, you know, I am not a Conservative, I'm a Thatcherite. That's what this last year has taught me. And that is a really interesting kind of the debates within the party about what should the party stand for, who should they be campaigning for.
And how bizarre, getting back to this book, how did this woman, who had always been centre-left, and, well, I mean, an active...
Before...
Well, no, but thinking about her growing up and into adulthood and university...
Yes.
You know, she'd been an active Liberal Democrat. She'd wanted to get rid of the Queen.
First Lib Dem Prime Minister.
You know, I mean, well... And suddenly, from being a Remainer, where did this Damascene conversion come from?
I think all politicians have it to a certain extent in parties, but I think also a pragmatism, an ability to survive, and a kind of ambition and drive, which I think sets her apart. She was able to do the long hours, do the kind of travelling for trade, and that's what really, I think, sold her to a lot of people. And I think it was a party that sort of, it was her or Rishi. There were some Johnsonites who'd never get over that fact, so they put their faction behind her, and that really was a kind of key difference in that leadership contest.
You were there at The Spectator.
Yep.
You know, a magazine that tries to move the boundaries of debate in terms of conservative thinking. And I know you're not the editor, but Do a spectator think the Tories have even half a chance at the next election?
I think it's going to be difficult. The fundamentals, you look at interest rates going up, you look at how that's going to affect votes, you see 15, 20-point Labour leads in the polls. I think the danger is that the mini-budget might have been a bit of a Black Wednesday moment, a bit where it crystallised in voters' minds, the mood has changed, and they think that actually Labour could be more credible with these things. It'll be a tough road. There's some, if you speak to around Rishi Sunak, the number 10, who think there's a way to do it. I think those 5 promises he said are possible, but it's going to be a long road to see. So we will wait and see with interest to see if he can pull it off.
Well, 10 years ago, well, more than that, but, exactly 10 years ago, I was leading a UKIP insurgency against a Conservative Party that didn't feel very Conservative. They'd, for example, brought in gay marriage without even having a manifesto commitment to do it. One very clear example, they'd gone mad for wind energy, onshore wind at the time, not very popular, not really promised in the manifesto. And there was a UKIP insurgency that frightened the life out of the Conservatives and forced Cameron into offering a referendum that he never ever wanted to do that, for obvious reasons. Now, reform at the moment, and I'm the honorary president, I'm not actively involved. There is another insurgency building, isn't there?
I think that if you get 6 to 7% of the polls, which they're currently on, that is going to harm the Conservatives more than it is Labour, and that's going to be very interesting compared to, say, 2019, when, of course, the Brexit Party stood down. I think there is a sense of the Conservative activists, there's certainly a sense of anger among some, and I think that could be damaging to the party. Maybe not so now in the next year or so, but in opposition, that would be very interesting. And I think the first kind of post-Sunak leadership election would be very interesting to see what happens there.
And likely, I guess, that the general election doesn't happen until we run towards the end of 2024.
I think that's the assumption that most are operating on, yes. I think it's very difficult to see. If you look at those promises he set out, inflation coming down, he needs years to achieve that. You want the small boats crisis to deal with as well. I think time is what they're going to need.
He's not going to deal with that, is he?
I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it's more small piece measures. I think the Rwanda scheme, for instance, which I think we've discussed about on this programme before, clearly is not going to work in the way that it was promised as a silver bullet by Boris Johnson. But I think that it depends obviously how the politicians spin things in terms of...
He has promised... And it's there on the Conservative Party manifesto, a website rather, stop the boats. Not stop some of the boats.
Well, this was the thing.
Stop the boats.
At that press conference, and putting the figure on it is obviously, there's the headline figure, and then it's like, when will you claim victory, etc., with which policy? So we will see whether it'll be enough for you, Nigel, or for you.
Well, we'll have to see. Final thought, James Heal. Are there any Prince Harry-style revelations in here?
There's some fun stuff, I'll say, from various bits of Liz's career. The DIT year stands quite a good wild ride, but nothing about Elizabeth Arden cream, I'll say that.
OK, thank goodness for that. James Hill, thank you very much. And Liz Truss, looking for her political legacy. We'll take a short break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the course of the last week, there have been public meetings that have taken place at Cretan in Northamptonshire, Cottingham up in East Yorkshire, and both have been protests, albeit very, very quiet English protests, at large numbers of young males who've crossed the English Channel being put into asylum seeker either hotels, manor houses or student accommodation. But in Ireland, this is taking on a whole different tenor. Last year, in Ireland, 70,000 asylum seekers came into the country. Now, bear in mind, they only have a population of just over 5 million. And the Irish are protesting. Tonight at 5 o'clock, another protest on the East Wall in Dublin. That's the second protest that's happened in that area. I was told across the whole of Ireland last weekend there were 5 separate protests. And the strength of feeling, the passion, the language that is being used is much stronger than anything we've seen thus far in England and Wales. And it's very, very much, we are not going away as protesters until these sites are closed. Watch this space. I have a feeling that immigration and asylum in Ireland is about to become a very major political issue. Now, what the Farage moment? These people drive me to total distraction. Her name is Professor Susan Jebb, and she's the boss of the Food Standards Agency. But speaking in a personal capacity, she said it's quite wrong that people bring cakes into the office. Yes, cakes on their birthdays, or perhaps someone's made something nice at home. No, don't put temptation before me. I can't manage it. And she compared it to passive smoking in pubs in the good old days when we used to be allowed to smoke in pubs. And I just loathe people like Professor Susan Jebb. She doesn't want us to eat cake or to smoke or to drink or to do anything. She wants us to preserve ourselves for those last few bonus years where we're incapable of controlling any of our bodily functions, and there we are in the old people's home. I am sick to death of these Puritans wanting to literally control every aspect of our lives. Please shut up, go away, do your job. We're not interested. We find you very boring. And to all of you, if it is your birthday, don't work from home. Take some cake into the office. Now, a big, significant move in the USA tonight, and this is politically very significant. Donald Trump, in 2016, and 2015 for that matter, but in 2016 he got to where he did by the relentless use of Twitter. It was through Twitter and building up to over 80 million followers that he was able to put his messages out and literally to set the agenda for the days, the weeks, the months, national debate in the USA and often across the rest of the Western world too. Well, it's been announced tonight that Donald Trump is rejoining Twitter and Facebook. Now, Facebook, not as important for Trump. He never focused very hard on Facebook. But Trump back on Twitter, it'll drive the left absolutely crazy. It's manna from heaven for the media in America and elsewhere. And let's just see. I've got a feeling that Donald Trump will once again use Twitter very effectively and start to dominate the agenda. We'll see whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, but without doubt, it is a very significant moment. Now, ever since COVID-19 first hove into view, there have been all sorts of arguments about what medical treatments are acceptable for COVID, what we're allowed to talk about, not talk about. The vaccines, of course, the boosters, which we've all been told we absolutely must have. Well, in a moment, on Talking Pints, I'm joined by a man who's been involved with vaccine development going way back into the early 1980s, and he's become pretty sceptical about the vaccine. And like Donald Trump, he too has been banned from Twitter. He's back on Twitter now, as is the former president. In a moment, we'll talk to Robert Malone.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, are Harry and Meghan threats to freedom of speech? Royal biographer Tom Bauer weighs in, and Meghan's estranged sister, Samantha Markle, gives her first review of Spare. Is Sturgeon exploiting vulnerable children to force through independence? Westminster's toughest talking MP, Lee Anderson, gives his verdict on Scotland's gender bill. Plus, will Boris Johnson's televised Partygate probe be a live kangaroo court or kick off his comeback? Join Dan, Sarah Vine, Konstantin Kissin and more of Britain's top commentators 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's Talking Pints. Yes, it's my favourite time of the day. You all know that. And I'm joined today by Robert Malone. Robert, welcome to
Nigel.
the programme. Now, you've held all sorts of posts over the years. You know, some very senior posts in biotech and medical advice and all of these things. You were working on the RNA, or as it became mRNA vaccine, going right back. We're almost going back 40 years, aren't we?
Yeah, it was a little moment of time when I was a young man, 28, working at the Salk Institute. And I had it was absolutely not the intention to go there. It was just a byproduct of trying to build a system to ask some basic science questions about retroviruses. One thing led to another. I wanted to be a gene therapist. I wanted to cure pediatric disease and, genetic disease. And this whole cascade of things happened. You know, this is right place at the right time. You can put all the pretty words around, being well informed and surrounded by genius and all that, but it just kind of happened, a ping pong thing. And I had enough background in vaccinology because I kind of cut my teeth in the AIDS business at UC Davis. And then it all kind of came together as a whole new idea that gene therapy really wasn't going to work because of the immune response. And so then you're sitting there, okay, what are you going to do with this? And the answer was, well, you make lemonade out of lemons. And you can use gene therapy tech and use this RNA as a drug in particular to generate a different type of vaccine. And that's the essence of it.
Is it fair to say that you are the inventor of this?
So that's obviously something that's been contested quite a bit. And the press that has contested it never cites the 9 patents. And they never cite the original invention disclosures. The way I've come to kind of try to strike a compromise with all of this controversy is to say that I created the platform technology, the original platform technology, and the ideas for how to use it, and not the press has. You know how sometimes they will grab on, they'll put words in your mouth. They'll grab onto a concept and then they'll attack you for the straw man. I know you know it. Okay, it's a common strategy. So that, the assertion that I was claiming that I invented these vaccines.
Either way, you were a significant part in the development of this. Now, we fast forward a few years, and we're told that a new virus has emerged in China. Of course, no one, not for a moment did anybody say it could have come from a lab, but I'm not going to go there tonight because that's a whole separate debate. What I found really interesting from the beginning was there were lots of respected medical people suggesting there were ways of treating COVID. People have got this COVID-19. People can be very, very ill and people can die of it. There's no question about that. We know in this country the average age of death is 82, I think.
The average age of death from COVID was, what, 83?
Yeah. Look, we know those things, but not to underplay it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to make fun of it.
No.
Okay, no. Absolute respect for families that have lost in such tragedy.
But it seemed here in this country that the treatment was you put you in a hospital, make you comfortable, and if things got really bad, put you on a ventilator from which your chances of coming back weren't very, very good. There were people out there suggesting that there were drugs,
early treatment,
like ivermectin, etc., that hydroxychloroquine. I remember hearing all these theories. Now, I couldn't work out, without medical knowledge, whether these were all crackpots or whether there was some validity in it. But how is it? Why was anybody that dared to suggest any of these remedies, why were they literally shut down, talked out by the World Health Organization? What was going on there?
So we can speculate, which I try not to do. I try to remain fact-based. I want to see the receipts before I make assertions and not make wild, claims about conspiracies and things like that. one of the fascinating things with what's being revealed in the Twitter files now is we're starting to get the answer to that. And one of the recent drops involved Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner that went straight into being, after a 2-month respite, I think it was, straight into being a board member for Pfizer. And in the Twitter files, we now have the documents, the receipts, that Scott Gottlieb was directly interacting with Twitter to suppress stories and information and persons. The most fascinating being that he, a former Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, which is pretty high rank, third down from the president, had suggested in a tweet that natural immunity was quite effective. And Gottlieb intervened with this tweet from Brett Gior and got it suppressed and labeled. And Gottlieb's status as a former FDA commissioner was about 2 or 3 ranks below.
But as you say, suppression of debate was happening, and that's now, and Musk has made that very, very clear. And it's good that you're back on Twitter as well as the former president. I'm very pleased. Very pleased.
I'm a tiny fish
you
compared
haven't quite
to...
got his follow. You never know, though. You never know. I mean, let's be frank about it. The vaccine comes along very early on, very quickly. We're told it's the great saviour. We're told we have to have it. We're terrified into having it. We're then bullied into having boosters in the most extraordinary way. At what point did you become sceptical about this vaccine?
So at the very beginning, I did a threat assessment, and the group that I was working with, I got them focused on repurposed drugs. What I became really skeptical about earliest was the bioethics of how this was being handled. And then when a Canadian PhD obtained the common technical document, the dossier that Pfizer had submitted to the Japanese government to justify proceeding with this product, and I was asked to review it, I could see there that all of the norms that I had been trained on for decades had been disregarded, and that data had been it seemed like as if it was randomly pulled from whatever drawer they had it in, assembled to create this thing to justify moving forward, which is completely different from the established norms.
And then when we start to see, and let's face it, all vaccines have harms. All vaccines have...
All drugs have harms.
Yeah, okay. No, fine, I get that. But very interestingly, there's been a lot of speculation about, athletes, about, myocarditis amongst young men. And yet, Imperial College London tell us that the vaccine saved 10 million lives across the world.
Right.
The World Health Organization tell us, the National Health Service tell us. Everyone sticks to this narrative that the harms are almost insignificant. So what I want to ask you, Robert, is, you have said there are potentially quite serious harms from this.
The data are the data.
How is it you're right and they're all wrong?
Are you asking in the present, or are you asking historically?
In the present.
Okay, so you're asking why Malone?
Yes.
Are you saying these things when
and you've been saying them as well.
Established narrative is otherwise? I don't have a good answer for that. All I can say is that I've remained fact-based, data-based, and I believe objective, and I haven't had any particular financial conflicts of interest or organizational conflicts of interest, so I've been at liberty to call it like I see it.
Are you suggesting that other people have had financial conflicts of interest?
This is a fundamental principle in everything, is we all have conflict of interest. And the question is, are we able to manage them adequately? And so now, for instance, that we're anticipating in the United States a major upcoming ACIP, this is the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices at the CDC, meeting in a few weeks now. And suddenly we're seeing all kinds of cracks in the wall with people that previously were very, very bullish on these products, suddenly coming out and saying, hey, we have reservations now There's data that was hidden from us, this new information that's coming out. There's this Cleveland Clinic study that's a massive study that shows that your risk of getting disease and being hospitalized increases with the number of inoculations. I'm choosing my words. Okay. And so you ask, how is it that I'm right and they're wrong? I kind of don't like that synthesis. I would say the data are the data. And I have been bold at times in drawing conclusions from the data, but it's always been data-based, notoriously on Ingram. 2 winters ago at Christmas time, I said it looked like Omicron was kind of going to be a Christmas gift, and we were all going to basically get a live attenuated vaccine, whether or not we want it.
No, I remember you saying.
And everybody was shocked.
And by the way,
but that's exactly the way it's happened.
I'll be honest, Robert. I mean, I've become, on this journey, I've become more and more sceptical and more concerned about the closing down of debate as this period of time has gone by. Are you concerned about long-term harms from the vaccine?
The answer is yes, and I don't see how anybody that's if you are a credible developer, product developer in this space with vaccines, you have to have the humility to recognize that there are always long-term risks, and you will not know whether or not they're going to manifest until they do, which is why it normally takes a decade. But in this case, like, for instance, here in your green room, we have my good friend, Dr. Ryan Cole, who, as a pathologist, has been seeing, as he say, the cells don't lie. He's seeing on his glass slides evidence of unusual behavior in cancers. And he's kind of been a canary in the coal mine saying, hey, guys, this looks like a potential risk. And this is how medicine, one of the things Ryan and I have in common is we're both pathologists in training. I taught pathology for many years, and pathologists have always been kind of the quality control in medicine. And we're trained to kind of do signal detection, to look for patterns. And when they happen, to say, hey, looks like something's going on, we ought to investigate that further. And we're seeing those signals.
Robert,
and I hope they don't manifest.
I'm delighted we're doing this over a drink. We need one to cheer us up, I think, really. You know, I have to say, thank you for joining us. You've been very brave in speaking out. You've been cast out by many as a pariah, but you've done what you believe to be right. And I thank you for coming on the programme.
It's my pleasure,
very much
Nigel.
indeed.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're pretty much out of time. Mary asks me, there's talk of Johnson making a comeback. Do you think he can do it? Well, Mary, I tell you what, he's got his fans. As I said, it's rather like Bonnie Prince Charlie. They sort of drink across a glass, the king across the water. But he's going to come back, and some people love him. But gosh, he's upset quite a few people as well with a series of broken promises. I don't think he can come back. But hey, he's going to enjoy life writing books and speaking in America. We're done for the day. I'm back with you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Going to hand you over now to Lawrence Fox.
Good evening, Nigel. Tonight we will be talking trans, traffic, and whether they should be allowed to eat cake. But first, the weather.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's cold and frosty again overnight and indeed for much of tomorrow. Most places not seeing any showers, but where we are seeing showers, they are a wintry mix of sleet, snow and hail. Low pressure just edging away from the east. The wind's still coming down from the north. A subtle shift in the wind direction, bringing more showers into North Wales and northwest England. So some snow possible here and things could turn icy. We have a number of Met Office yellow warnings in place for snow and ice, and icy conditions also possible across the southwest of England. For many central and eastern parts, it's just dry and clear and cold. -2, -3 to start the day. That's in towns and cities. Rural spots significantly lower. So a frosty start to Thursday. Still some sleet and snow showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, and more snow coming into northern Scotland. Although here maybe turning a little bit more to rain, certainly close to coast. There'll be a bitter wind here, but elsewhere out of the wind, temperatures struggling up above freezing. 3 or 4 degrees for most in the afternoon in the sunny spells, but quickly temperatures dropping back below freezing through tomorrow evening. So again, a fairly extensive frost. Still some showers for North Wales, Northern Ireland and particularly northeastern Scotland. So again, ice is likely to be a hazard on Friday morning. Fog is also likely, some dense patches of freezing fog across parts of northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland that could last for most of Friday. But most of us on Friday just dry, fine and sunny. A bright, crisp winter's day with temperatures stumbling up a degree or so, still below average, but actually with little breeze and the sunshine shouldn't feel too bad, 5 to 6 Celsius. So the cold weather is persisting. Signs of a change slowly, and I do mean slowly, milder air creeping in from the west, although the east will stay cold right through the weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.